My wife gave my Rolex to her lover, thinking I wouldn't notice it was missing. But I'm actually his boss, and now he's facing jail for theft, while she's begging me to forgive her. I'm Danny, 34, working insurance. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, insurance guy. How exciting. But stick with me, because this story isn't about policies and premiums. It's about the kind of betrayal that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you. I've been married to Sarah for 8 years. Met her back in college when we were both broke students living off ramen and dreams. She was studying marketing. I was grinding through business classes. And we had this whole plan mapped out. Graduate, start careers, build something together. The American dream, right? Well, I actually pulled it off. Started my insurance agency from nothing. Literally working out of my garage for the first 2 years. Sarah got her own marketing job at a local firm while I handled everything. The clients, the books, the late-night paperwork. Slowly built something real. All on my own. Then there's James. Now James is where the story gets interesting. I met him about 3 years ago at Mickey's Auto Shop downtown. You know the type of place. Grease stains on everything, classic rock playing from a beat-up radio, and mechanics who've seen it all. James was working on my car, and we got to talking. Turns out the guy had some serious baggage. Fresh out of county lockup. Couldn't find decent work anywhere because of his record. But here's the thing. The dude was sharp. Really sharp. He explained my transmission problem better than any mechanic I'd ever met. Broke down exactly what was wrong and how to fix it without trying to upsell me on a bunch of garbage I didn't need. That's rare these days. Most places see you coming and start calculating how much they can squeeze out of you. Not James. He was straight up, honest, and clearly knew his stuff. So I made a decision that probably sounds crazy to most people. I offered him a job. Not charity. Mind you, I needed someone good with details, someone who could handle the technical side of claims processing. The pay wasn't amazing, but was steady, legal, and came with benefits. James nearly cried right there in the shop. Said nobody had given him a real chance since he got out. I brought him into my office, spent weeks training him personally. Showed him how insurance really works, how to spot fraudulent claims, how to build relationships with clients. The guy was a sponge. Absorbed everything. Asked smart questions. Never complained about the long hours. Within 6 months, he was handling some of our biggest accounts. My clients loved him because he actually listened to their problems instead of just pushing paperwork around. Sarah liked him too. Maybe too much, but I'm getting ahead of myself. At the time, I just thought it was nice that my wife got along with my employee. She'd always asked how James was doing, if he was adjusting well, that kind of thing. Seemed normal enough. Hell, I was proud of what we'd accomplished. Took a guy who society had written off and gave him a real shot at rebuilding his life. Now about that Rolex. For my company's 10-year anniversary, I decided to treat myself. Not because I needed to show off or anything like that, but because I'd earned it. 10 years of 16-hour days, dealing with difficult clients, building something from absolutely nothing. The Rolex Daytona wasn't just a watch. It was a symbol. Proof that a regular guy from Ohio could make it if he worked hard enough and played by the rules. I had it engraved too. DS until the end. Danny Stevens until the end. Sarah thought it was cheesy, but I didn't care. That watch represented everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for. Cost me $15,000, which might not sound like much to some people, but for a guy who started with nothing, it was huge. I had it insured, registered, the whole 9 yards. Kept all the paperwork in my home safe. The watch lived in its original box in our bedroom closet, tucked away with my other important stuff. I didn't wear it every day. Honestly, most of the time I just wore my old Timex. The Rolex was for special occasions, client meetings, anniversary dinners with Sarah. During the summer, I barely touched it. Never was much for wearing watches when it's hot out, and Ohio summers can be brutal. For months, that watch sat there in its box, safe and sound. Or so I thought. I mean, why wouldn't it be safe? It was in my own house, in my own bedroom, in a closet that only Sarah and I had access to. I trusted my home. I trusted my wife, and I trusted that the people I let into my life would respect what belonged to me. But here's what I learned the hard way. Trust is like that expensive watch. It looks solid, feels permanent, seems like it'll last forever. But it's actually more fragile than you think. One wrong move, one moment of carelessness, and suddenly you're staring at something broken that can never quite be fixed the same way again. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I had a big client meeting coming up, wanted to look sharp, so I decided to wear the Rolex. Walked into the bedroom, opened the closet, reached for that familiar box. The weight felt wrong immediately. Too light. I opened it up, and my stomach dropped straight to the floor. Empty. The box was completely empty. No watch, no papers, nothing. Just that little velvet cushion where my Rolex used to sit, looking back at me like it was mocking everything I thought I knew about my life. I stood there for probably 5 minutes, just staring at that empty box, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. $15,000 worth of watch doesn't just disappear into thin air. Sarah was home when I found that empty box. I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost because she immediately asked what was wrong. When I told her about the missing Rolex, she got this concerned look on her face and started throwing out suggestions. Maybe I'd moved it somewhere and forgotten. Maybe I'd put it in the safe at the office. You know how it is when you're looking for your keys and someone starts suggesting all the obvious places you've already checked 3 times. But I knew exactly where that watch should have been. I'm the kind of guy who has a system for everything. Insurance has taught me that organization saves your butt when things go sideways. The Rolex lived in that box, in that spot, period. I checked everywhere anyway, though. Went through my home safe twice, tore apart my car, even drove the office at 10 at night to check my desk drawers. Nothing. That's when this weird feeling started creeping up my spine. You know that feeling when something's off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? Like when you walk into your house and everything looks normal, but something just feels wrong. That's what this was. I didn't want to start pointing fingers or acting paranoid, but my gut was telling me this wasn't some random break-in. Random thieves don't ignore the TV, the laptop, and Sarah's jewelry just to grab one watch from a bedroom closet. So I made a decision that probably saved me a lot of heartache later. I didn't say anything to anyone. Not to Sarah, not to James, not even to my insurance buddy who handles personal property claims. I just decided to watch and wait. Sometimes in this business, you learn more by keeping your mouth shut and your eyes open than by making noise and forcing people's hands. The next few days were torture, honestly. I kept looking at Sarah, searching for any sign that she knew something. Was she acting nervous? Different? But she seemed completely normal. Made dinner. Talked about her day at the marketing firm. Complained about her boss like always. Either she was completely innocent or she was a way better actress than I'd ever given her credit for. Then came Thursday. We had our monthly team meeting at the office. Just me, James, and my secretary Linda, who's been with me since year 3. Linda always brings in these amazing homemade cookies. And we go over the big cases, discuss any problems, that kind of thing. Nothing fancy, but it keeps everyone on the same page. James walked in a few minutes late, apologizing about traffic. He looked good. New shirt, hair freshly cut, seemed like he was doing well for himself. I was actually feeling proud, thinking about how far he'd come since those early days at Mickey's auto shop. Then he sat down, reached for one of Linda's cookies, and pulled back his sleeve to check the time. My heart stopped. Right there on his wrist was a Rolex Daytona. Same black bezel, same white face, same everything. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Linda was talking about some claim or another, but I couldn't hear a word she was saying. All I could focus on was that watch. Now, here's the thing about Rolex Daytonas. They're not exactly common. You don't just stumble across them at the local department store. They're expensive, they're rare, and most guys who own them take pretty good care of them. So seeing James wearing one was already suspicious. But I tried to tell myself maybe he'd saved up. Maybe he'd gotten a bonus I didn't know about. Maybe there was some perfectly innocent explanation. Then James reached up to wipe some sweat off his forehead. Linda keeps that office way too warm. And when he turned his wrist, I saw it. The engraving on the side of the case. Clear as day. DS until the end. My initials. My stupid, sentimental message to myself. There was no doubt anymore. That was my watch on his wrist. I somehow made it through the rest of that meeting without losing my mind. Nodded at the right times, made appropriate comments about quarterly projections, acted like everything was normal. But inside I was spinning. How did James get my watch? Did Sarah give it to him? Did he steal it himself somehow? And if Sarah was involved, what exactly was going on between them? That evening, I told Sarah I had some paperwork to catch up on and wouldn't be home until late. Instead, I drove around town for a while, trying to process what I'd seen. Part of me wanted to confront James directly, demand an explanation. But my insurance training kicked in. When you suspect fraud, you investigate first and accuse later. Jumping to conclusions is how innocent people get hurt and guilty people get away. Around 9:30, I found myself driving through James's neighborhood. It's a decent area, nothing fancy but not run down either. Tree-lined streets, small houses with little front yards. The kind of place where working people live when they're trying to get their lives together. I wasn't planning anything specific, just wanted to see where he lived, maybe get a feel for his situation. I parked about half a block down from his house, under a big oak tree where my car wouldn't be too obvious. The street was quiet. Most folks were probably inside watching TV or getting ready for bed. James's house had lights on in the front room, and I could see shadows moving around inside. Seemed normal enough. Then I saw it. Sarah's Honda Civic. Parked right there in his driveway like it belonged there. My wife's car at my employee's house at 9:30 on a Thursday night. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might throw up right there in my car. But I forced myself to stay calm, to keep watching, to gather information before I did anything stupid. About 15 minutes later, the front door opened. Sarah came out first, and she was wearing a hoodie I'd never seen before, way too big for her, obviously men's clothing. She looked tired but relaxed, like someone who just spent a comfortable evening somewhere she felt at home. Behind her came James, and even from half a block away, I could see that damn watch glinting on his wrist. He walked to her car, and they stood there talking quietly for a minute. Then he leaned down and kissed her forehead, gentle and familiar, like they'd done this 100 times before. She got in her car. He waved goodbye, and she drove off toward our house, toward the home we'd built together, where she'd probably slip into bed next to me and act like she'd been there all evening. I sat in that car for another 20 minutes, just processing what I'd seen. My wife and my employee. The two people I'd trusted most in the world outside of family. The woman I'd loved for 8 years and the man I'd given a second chance when nobody else would. And there was my watch, right in the middle of it all, like some twisted symbol of everything I'd lost without even knowing it. That's when the cold feeling in my spine turned into something else entirely. Not anger exactly. Not yet anyway. More like clarity, like when fog lifts and suddenly you can see the road ahead perfectly. I knew what I was dealing with now. The question was what I was going to do about it. But I'll tell you one thing. I wasn't going to do anything hasty. In insurance, we have a saying, document everything, assume nothing, and always have proof before you make your move. Sarah and James had no idea I'd seen what I'd seen, which meant I had the advantage. And in my business, having the advantage is everything. I didn't say a word when I got home that night. Sarah was already in bed, pretending to sleep, but I could tell by her breathing that she was awake, probably wondering where I'd been, maybe feeling guilty about her little evening visit to James's place. I brushed my teeth, got into my pajamas, and lay down next to the woman who'd been living a double life right under my nose. The next morning was surreal. Sarah made coffee like always, kissed me goodbye like always, asked about my day like always. Oscar-worthy performance, honestly. If I hadn't seen her car in James's driveway with my own eyes, I might have convinced myself I was losing my mind. But I knew what I knew. The question was how deep this rabbit hole went. See, here's what most people don't understand about insurance work. Half the job is being a detective. You learn to spot patterns, inconsistencies, things that don't add up. And once you start looking for patterns, they're everywhere. So I decided to do what I do best, investigate. First stop was our home computer. Sarah and I shared everything: bank accounts, credit cards, even our GPS tracking through our phone plan. We'd set it up years ago for practical reasons, like knowing when the other person was stuck in traffic or had made it safely to their destination. Never thought I'd be using it to track my wife's affair, but life's funny that way. I pulled up the GPS history for Sarah's phone. Holy smokes. She'd been going to James's neighborhood regularly for the past 3 months. Always on days when I was out of town on business. Always staying for 2 to 3 hours at a time. Sometimes she'd stop at the grocery store afterward, probably to establish some kind of alibi in case I asked what she'd been up to. The pattern was so clear it was almost insulting. Every Tuesday when I had my overnight trip to Columbus. Every other Thursday when I drove down to Cincinnati for client meetings. Even that weekend I'd gone to my brother's wedding in Michigan, she'd been at James's place for 6 hours straight. They probably had dinner, watched movies, played house while I was celebrating family milestones 3 states away. But the GPS data was just the beginning. I started thinking about other things that hadn't made sense at the time, like how Sarah suddenly started asking detailed questions about my travel schedule, or how she'd become super supportive of me taking on clients in other cities, encouraging me to build a business, even though it meant more time away from home. I thought she was being a good wife, supporting my career ambitions. Turns out she was just clearing the schedule for her boyfriend. Then there was James's sudden improvement in, well, everything. New clothes, new haircut, seemed more confident and relaxed at work. I'd attributed it to him settling into his new life, finding his footing after getting out of county lockup. But now I was wondering if maybe he had some extra motivation to clean up his act, like impressing his boss's wife. For instance, the watch thing really bothered me, though. Sarah knew how much that Rolex meant to me. She'd been there when I bought it, rolled her eyes at the engraving, listened to me talk about what it represented. For her to just take it out of our closet and give it to another man, that wasn't impulse or accident. That was calculated. That was her literally giving away a symbol of everything I'd worked for to the guy she was cheating with. And James? He had to have known where that watch came from. $15,000. Watches don't disappear out of nowhere, especially not in the hands of ex-cons working their first legitimate job in years. When Sarah handed him that box, he had to have realized he was accepting stolen property. Either he didn't care, or he figured I'd never notice, or maybe he thought their little secret was safe forever. Here's what really got at me, though. The arrogance of it all. James wearing my watch to work, sitting in meetings with me, probably thinking he was getting away with something. Every time he checked the time during those team meetings, he was basically flashing stolen goods in my face. And Sarah, coming home to me every night, sleeping in our bed, probably laughing about how clueless her husband was. That's when I made my decision. In insurance, we have procedures for dealing with fraud. You document everything, you follow the law, and you let the system handle it. Personal feelings don't matter. Facts matter. Evidence matters. And I had both. I spent the weekend putting together my case like I would for any insurance fraud investigation. Printed out the GPS data showing Sarah's visits to James's address. Made copies of the Rolex paperwork. Purchase receipt, insurance documentation. Serial number, photos of the engraving. Called my buddy at the police department and asked about filing a theft report for a stolen watch. Didn't mention names yet. Just wanted to understand the process. Monday morning, I walked into the police station with a folder full of evidence. The officer who took my statement was this older guy named Detective Martinez, who'd worked property crimes for 20 years. He looked over my paperwork, listened to my story, and nodded like he'd seen this kind of thing 1,000 times before. The beauty of it was the watch was registered to me, insured under my name, and I had photos proving the engraving matched. James couldn't claim he'd bought it legitimately because there was no record of me selling it. He couldn't claim it was a gift because, well, I was the one filing the theft report. From a legal standpoint, it was pretty cut and dried. Detective Martinez explained that they'd need to recover the watch first, confirm it was the same one from my paperwork. If everything checked out, they'd have grounds for theft charges. Didn't matter if the person was my employee or if my wife had given it to him. Taking someone else's property without permission is stealing, period. I gave them James's address and work schedule. told them he'd likely be wearing the watch, since he'd worn it to work every day that week. Martinez said they'd handle it quietly, professionally. No drama, no confrontation, just standard procedure for recovering stolen property. That Tuesday, while James was at lunch, 2 officers showed up at my office. They were polite about it, but firm. Asked James to step outside, explained they were investigating a theft report, requested to see the watch he was wearing. I watched through my office window as James's face went from confusion to panic to resignation in about 30 seconds. They took photos of the watch, compared the serial number to my paperwork, confirmed the engraving matched my documentation. Then they read James's rights and placed him under arrest. Standard procedure for possession of stolen property over $5,000. The watch went into evidence. James went to police station, and I went back to my desk like nothing had happened. My secretary, Linda, was freaking out, of course, kept asking what was going on, why the police had arrested James, if everything was okay. I just told her there had been a misunderstanding about some personal property, and it would get sorted out. No need to air dirty laundry in front of employees. But I knew it wasn't going to get sorted out. Not for James, and definitely not for Sarah. Because this wasn't really about the watch anymore. The watch was just evidence. What this was really about was trust, betrayal, and the fact that the 2 people closest to me had decided I was too stupid or too naive to notice what was happening right under my nose. They were about to learn otherwise. And unlike their sneaking around in the shadows, everything I was doing would be completely legal, completely documented, and completely devastating to both of their futures. Because here's the thing about insurance guys. We're really, really good at making sure people face the consequences of their actions. Sarah found out about James's arrest about an hour after it happened. Apparently, someone from his apartment complex called her, probably gave her number as his emergency contact, which should have been my first clue that their relationship was more serious than just casual hookups. She called me at the office, voice shaking, asking if I knew anything about James being arrested for theft. I played it perfectly calm, told her I'd heard something about a police matter, but didn't have details, suggested she call the station if she was concerned. The whole time I'm thinking, this is it. This is where she comes clean, admits what's been going on, maybe even shows some remorse for what she's done. But nope. She just said she hoped everything would work out okay and hung up. That evening, she tried to act normal again. Made dinner, asked about my day, even suggested we watch a movie together. It was almost impressive how she could compartmentalize everything. Her boyfriend was sitting in a jail cell charged with stealing my watch, and she was offering to make popcorn for movie night. Either she was completely delusional or she seriously underestimated my intelligence. The next morning, Sarah showed up at my office unannounced. Linda buzzed me to say my wife was there to see me, which was unusual since Sarah never visited during work hours. She came into my office looking frazzled, like she hadn't slept much. Good, I thought. About time this situation started affecting her as much as it was affecting me. She sat down across from my desk and launched into this whole speech about how the arrest was obviously some kind of mistake, how James was a good person who'd turned his life around, how I should use my connections to help clear things up. She even suggested that maybe someone had planned a watch on him, or maybe there was another watch that looked similar. The mental gymnastics were honestly impressive. I let her talk for about 10 minutes, just listening, taking notes. Then I opened my desk drawer and pulled out copies of all the evidence I'd given to the police. GPS tracking data showing her visits to James's address. Photos of the watch with the serial number clearly visible. The original purchase receipt with my name on it. I spread it all out on the desk between us like I was presenting an insurance claim. The look on her face when she realized what she was seeing was priceless. All the color drained out of her cheeks, and her mouth just kind of hung open. She tried to say something, started with some excuse about how she could explain everything, but I held up my hand to stop her. I told her the truth was pretty simple. She'd been having an affair with my employee. She'd stolen my watch from our bedroom and given it to him as a gift. He'd been stupid enough to wear it to work in front of me. Now he was facing theft charges, and she was an accessory to the crime. Oh, and our marriage was over. Sarah tried the whole crying routine then, tears streaming down her face. saying how sorry she was, how it had just happened, and she never meant for anyone to get hurt. She claimed she'd only given James the watch because she thought I didn't care about it anymore, since I never wore it, as if that made stealing it okay somehow. But here's what really got to me. She tried to play the victim. Said she'd only started seeing James because I was never home, because I cared more about building my business than spending time with her. Claimed she was lonely and confused, and James was just someone who listened to her problems. Like I was supposed to feel bad for working hard to provide the life we'd built together. I let her finish her whole sob story. Then I told her exactly how this was going to work. First, she was going to pack up her stuff and move out of our house. Today, I'd already changed the locks on my office and removed her name from all business accounts. But she could stay in the house until she found somewhere else to go. I wasn't a complete monster. Second, I was filing for divorce. No fault, quick and clean, but she wasn't getting half of everything like she might have in different circumstances. The business was mine alone. I'd built it before we got married, and she'd never been officially involved. The house was in my name because I qualified for the mortgage solo. She could have her car, her personal stuff, and whatever was in her individual checking account. Third, James was fired, effective immediately. I couldn't have someone facing theft charges representing my company to clients. Bad for business. Bad for my professional reputation. Plus, I was about to keep paying salary to the guy who'd been sleeping with my wife in my own watch. Sarah went through all the stages of grief right there in my office. Denial, claiming this was all a misunderstanding. Anger, yelling about how I was destroying people's lives over a piece of jewelry. Bargaining, begging me to drop the charges and give their relationship my blessing. Depression, sobbing about how she'd ruined everything and didn't know how to fix it. But she never quite made it to acceptance. Even as I walked her to the door, she was still trying to convince me that we could work things out. That couples therapy could fix what was broken between us. That James meant nothing to her, and she'd end things immediately if I'd just give her another chance. I told her the problem wasn't that she'd had an affair. I mean, that was a problem, but it wasn't the biggest one. The biggest problem was that she'd stolen from me. She'd taken something that represented years of hard work and sacrifice and just gave it away to another man like it was hers to give. That showed a level of disrespect and entitlement that I couldn't get past. Plus, she'd been lying to my face for months, coming home every night, sleeping in our bed, acting like everything was normal while carrying on a whole separate relationship behind my back. That takes planning, calculation, a complete willingness to deceive someone who trusts you. Those aren't qualities you fix with counseling. After Sarah left, I called my lawyer and started the divorce paperwork. Called my insurance agent and reported the theft claim officially. Called Detective Martinez and confirmed they had everything they needed to proceed with charges against James. Then I sat in my office for a while, just processing the fact that my 8-year marriage was over. It's weird how you can know something intellectually, but still feel shocked when it becomes real. I'd known since that night outside James's house that my marriage was finished, but having it out in the open, making it legal and official, felt like stepping off a cliff. Even when you know you need to jump, that first step into empty air is terrifying. Linda knocked on my door around 4 o'clock, asked if I needed anything before she headed home. Sweet lady, probably could tell something major was happening, but too professional to ask directly. I told her I was fine, just dealing with some personal business. She patted my shoulder and said she'd see me tomorrow, and I realized that might be the most human contact I'd have for a while. That evening, I drove home to an empty house. Sarah had been efficient. I'll give her that. Most of her clothes were gone, her toiletries cleared out of the bathroom, even her favorite coffee mug missing from the kitchen cabinet, like she'd never lived there at all. I made myself a sandwich, sat at the kitchen table, and tried to figure out what came next. People ask me sometimes if I regret how I handled everything, if I think I was too harsh, too calculated, too unforgiving. And honestly, no, I don't regret a thing. Sarah and James made their choices, and choices have consequences. I just made sure those consequences were legal, documented, and proportional to what they'd done, because at the end of the day, this wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. And when someone steals your watch, sleeps with your wife, and lies to your face for months, they've shown you exactly how much respect they think you deserve. I just returned the favor. A month went by after Sarah moved out, and I'll be honest, it was probably the quietest month I'd had in years. No more walking on eggshells, wondering if my wife was texting another man. No more analyzing every conversation for hidden meanings. No more pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Just me, my work, and the strange peace that comes with finally knowing where you stand. The divorce proceedings were moving along smoothly. My lawyer said it would be wrapped up within another month or two, since Sarah wasn't contesting anything major. James had been sentenced to 6 months probation and community service. Apparently stealing a $15,000 watch gets you more than a slap on the wrist, but less than serious jail time if it's your first offense involving that much money. I'd heard through the grapevine that he was working at another auto shop across town. Decent place, but nothing like the opportunity I'd given him at my office. Word travels fast in business circles, and having theft charges on your record doesn't exactly make you a hot commodity in the professional world. I felt a little bad about that, honestly, but not bad enough to lose sleep over it. Sarah had moved in with her sister temporarily, according to Linda, who somehow always knows everything about everyone's personal business. Apparently, she was looking for her own apartment and had picked up some freelance marketing work to pay the bills. I didn't ask for details, and Linda was smart enough not to offer them. Ancient history, as far as I was concerned. Then came that Monday morning in March. I was running a few minutes late because I'd stayed up too late watching a basketball game the night before. One of the few perks of being newly single. You can watch sports until midnight without anyone complaining about the noise. I pulled into my usual parking spot outside the office building and was fumbling with my keys when I saw her. Sarah was standing by the main entrance, looking like she'd been there a while. She was wearing that tan coat I bought her for Christmas 2 years ago, but it looked different somehow. Too big for her frame, like she'd lost weight. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, and she had dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She looked, honestly, like someone who hadn't been sleeping much. For a second, I considered just walking past her and going straight into the building. We didn't have anything left to discuss that couldn't be handled through lawyers. But curiosity got the better of me. What could she possibly want that was important enough to ambush me at my workplace? She saw me coming and straightened up, trying to compose herself. But I could see her hands shaking even from across the parking lot. Whatever she was here to say, it was taking every ounce of courage she had. Part of me felt sorry for her. The other part remembered my empty watch box and stayed suspicious. Instead of approaching me directly, she opened the passenger door of my car and got in without being invited. Bold move, considering I could have just told her to get out and driven away. But I was curious enough to get in and hear what she had to say. Besides, we were in a public parking lot in broad daylight. What was the worst that could happen? She started talking immediately, like she'd rehearsed this whole speech and was afraid she'd lose her nerve if she didn't get it all out at once. She told me she'd made the biggest mistake of her life, that she destroyed the best thing she'd ever had, that she thought about me and our marriage every single day. Standard breakup apology stuff, basically. But then she got more specific, and that's when things got interesting. She said James had been a mistake from the beginning, that she'd been flattered by the attention, but never really loved him, that she'd only given him the watch because she was angry at me for working so much and wanted to hurt me somehow, as if that made it better rather than worse. She talked about how lonely she'd been, how disconnected we'd become, how she'd started the affair almost by accident and then couldn't figure out how to end it without destroying everything. She claimed she'd been planning to confess everything and break things off with James right around the time I discovered the missing watch. Convenient timing, I thought, but I kept listening. Then came the really desperate part. She grabbed my arm and started begging me to give her another chance. Said she'd do anything, therapy, counseling, whatever it took to rebuild trust between us. She promised she'd never contact James again, would get a new job if I wanted, would even sign a post-nuptial agreement giving up her rights to any future business assets. Her voice got higher and shakier as she went on, and I realized she was on the verge of completely breaking down. She kept saying she was nothing without me, that I was the only person who'd ever really loved her, that she couldn't imagine a future where we weren't together. It was actually pretty heartbreaking to watch someone fall apart like that. Then she did something I never expected. Right there in the front seat of my car, in the parking lot of my office building, she literally got down on her knees, turned sideways in the passenger seat, got down on the floor, and started begging me not to abandon her. Tears streaming down her face, hands clasped together like she was praying, the whole dramatic scene. I just sat there watching her, trying to process what I was seeing. This was the same woman who'd stolen my watch and given it to another man. The same woman who'd been sneaking around behind my back for months. The same woman who'd tried to make me feel guilty for working hard to build a life we'd shared together. But she was also the woman I'd loved for 8 years. The woman who'd supported me through the early days of building my business, who'd celebrated every small victory with me, who'd been my partner in creating the life I thought we both wanted. Seeing her completely broken down like that brought back a lot of memories I'd been trying to forget. For about 30 seconds, I actually considered it. Maybe people could change. Maybe the affair really was just a mistake born out of loneliness and poor judgment. Maybe we could find a way to rebuild what we'd lost. Couples survive infidelity all the time, right? Maybe I was being too harsh, too unforgiving. Then I remembered that watch sitting on James's wrist during our team meetings. I remembered the GPS data, showing months of planned deception. I remembered the look on her face when she tried to convince me that James stealing my watch was somehow a misunderstanding. And I realized that what I was feeling wasn't love anymore. It was just leftover habit and maybe a little pity. I told her to get up and get back in her seat like a normal person. Then I explained something that should have been obvious, but apparently wasn't. You can't fix something that was built on lies by telling more lies. You can't rebuild trust by begging for it. And you definitely can't undo months of betrayal with one dramatic scene in a parking lot. I told her that what she was really asking for wasn't forgiveness. It was permission to pretend the last few months hadn't happened. But they had happened. She'd made choices. And those choices had consequences. And no amount of crying or begging was going to change that. The person she'd been during the affair was the real her, not this broken-down version sitting in my car. Sarah asked me what she was supposed to do now, how she was supposed to move on, how she was supposed to live with what she'd done. And I told her the truth. That wasn't my problem anymore. She was a grown woman who'd made adult decisions, and now she got to live with adult consequences, just like the rest of us. She sat there for another few minutes, not saying anything, just crying quietly. Then she got out of the car and walked to her own vehicle parked across the lot. I watched her sit there for maybe 10 more minutes, head down on the steering wheel, shoulders shaking. Eventually, she started the engine and drove away. That was the last time I saw Sarah in person. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later, and she signed all the papers without any additional drama. I heard she eventually moved to another state, North Carolina, I think for a fresh start. I hope she found whatever she was looking for down there. As for me, I kept the watch when it was released from evidence, had it cleaned and serviced, and I wear it sometimes now. Not every day, but when I want to remember that I'm the kind of person who stands up for himself when people try to take advantage. The engraving still says until the end, and I guess that turned out to be more accurate than I'd expected. Just not the end I'd originally had in mind.